Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have my highest regard for the proponent of this amendment, but I rise in strong opposition to it. He actually, at the tail end of his remarks, raised, I think, one of the many issues that I have with this amendment being offered, which is that this really doesn't belong in this committee. The Services Contract Act is a program administered by the Department of Labor, and it should be at the Education and Workforce Committee. I'm the ranking member of the Workforce Protection Subcommittee, which deals with all issues regarding Fair Labor Standards Act, Davis-Bacon, or the Service Contract Act, which is what this amendment seeks to amend. I mean, the Service Contract Act was passed in 1965. It is, in a thumbnail sketch, a Fair Labor Standards sort of Davis-Bacon in terms of federal contracts that the federal government lets. And again, I'm concerned that this is an amendment that's being offered. I just checked with the ranking member of the subcommittee. There was no hearing held on this by the Armed Services Committee. Obviously, it's bypassing the Committee of Cognizance, which is the Education and Workforce Committee. And I would say that it really is a major rewrite of what the Services Contract Act was designed to do, which is, again, to extend the same protections to low-income workers that day in and day out just seem to be sort of brushed aside by this Congress. This past week, we had in the Senate an effort to take up a vote on the minimum wage, 54 votes in favor of it, but unfortunately, with the 60-vote automatic threshold for everything in the Senate, that majority vote was blocked. We have 195 House members who've signed the minimum wage in the House. Again, we can't even get a hearing in the Education and Workforce Committee, yet here we are today with an amendment that's bypassing the Subcommittee on Personnel, bypassing the Education and Workforce Committee, and again, with no input from Secretary Perez or the folks at that department in terms of the impact it's going to have on that single mother who is serving hamburgers and French fries at some of the chains that my friend from Virginia mentioned. I want to also, remind people that the Department of Navy is not helpless in terms of trying to raise questions that Mr. Rigel discussed here, which is that it might have an impact in terms of concessionaires being willing to enter into contracts with the federal government. There is an administrative mechanism for an appeal to be made to the new rule that is the subject of this amendment. And in fact, on April 8th, the Navy's office that administers these concession programs has in fact submitted a written appeal to the Department of Labor. So again, this amendment seeks to basically override a process that's already in place administratively by the Department of Labor. Again, well-settled law going back 49 years in this country, and yet here we are with an amendment that basically is saying that we are going to pull the plug on an effort to, again, try and bolster the wages of the lowest income workers in our economy. Last Friday, we had encouraging job news that came out with the report that 288,000 jobs were created, most of them in the private sector. But the flip side of that report is that wage growth, again, stayed totally flat, if not fluctuated or fluttered down a little bit. We have got to start doing something as a nation to start recognizing that people who do essential work in our economy get the full protection of laws that have been on the books under Republican and Democratic administrations, and yet here we are with an amendment that seeks to undercut that type of wage protection. So, again, if for no other reason, this amendment does not belong in this committee. It belongs in the committee that has jurisdiction over the U.S. Department of Labor. Again, there can be an opportunity for people who are concerned about its impact on military bases to wade in. Again, the order that was issued pursuant to the Service Contract Act applies not just to military bases. And again, we should not, without even a hearing, be moving forward with an amendment like this that's going to have severe ramifications, again, on that portion of the workforce that is really struggling the hardest in terms of trying to put food on the table for themselves and for their families. So again, I would, again, with all the highest degree of respect for the proponent, urge a no vote on this amendment.